Okay, we're here for the second part of our episode with Jane Taubenfeld Cohen, our first guest, and also now our second guest on the podcast Leadership Lenses. I'm Barry Kislowitz hosting. You can find us and talk back to us on Substack, Leadership Lenses, Barry Kislowitz on LinkedIn, or at our website, kislowitzconsulting.com. Jane, I would say welcome back, but as those of you who are listening know, Jane and I just kept sitting in the studio and we're continuing our recording. And we're going to jump into a different kind of dilemma. Last time we talked about a head and their leadership team. The head sort of manages their leadership team, and it's a complex and challenging relationship, but perhaps not the most challenging relationship the head goes into. So I often get people I'm coaching talking to me about their board chair, their board president, and saying things along the lines of, every Monday morning I open my email. I try and help them stay away from email until Monday morning, but whenever it is, I open my email and I've got a list of complaints from my president. And that list is whatever the person heard from friends over the weekend. My sister-in-law said this, my friend said this, my brother said this. And then I spend all day, all week, or all month just dealing with it. And I can't seem to get my president to understand that the board's role is not to be a complaint department.
Yeah. It's a complicated situation because, as we know, the role of head of school is both the employee of the board and the teacher of the board, both at the same time, which I don't know of many careers, many positions that are like that. And I would say it's the kind of thing where the person needs to help the board chair step back. And that doesn't happen in the heat of the moment. It doesn't happen on Monday morning, but it definitely could happen on a Wednesday, or it could happen on an evening, or it could happen over coffee, where you say, let's sit down and talk about what I need from the board and how that works. I will say that lots of times new heads don't feel comfortable having that conversation and need an outside person to help them. And that's totally understandable. Um, there are articles that have been written, there are things that you can share, but they don't feel completely comfortable because they want that relationship to be as strong as it can be, and they're afraid that it will get in the way. I, of course, believe that that conversation would strengthen the relationship, but I'm not a new head of school, so I don't know that I would have felt that my first year or two as a head. So the question of whether an outside person should help is a good question. This is something where the board chair really thinks they're protecting the head, right? So some perspective taking. What is it that the board chair is trying to do? The board chair cares so much that the reputation of the school be stellar, that every complaint feels like personal to the board chair, and they want the head of school to know about it, and they think that's my job to make sure the head knows about it. That's in the best of circumstances. Are
Right.
there board chairs that just want to be annoying? Maybe. Of course,
Right.
that's true. But let's
I've
talk about
I've
on the
seen
best
more
of.
heads interpret it as, and someone actually said this to me last week. They said, do all presidents have egos this big? So we can go into my answer separately, but the heads I've heard interpret it as the board chair wants to make sure they themselves don't look bad. And that's
For
why they're
sure,
heads,
that
so
could be
nothing
true in
about.
some communities. I think that could be true in the communities where everyone lives in the same community. They go, to the same shul. They see each other in and out of school, on the soccer field, everywhere. It's very, very hard for a board chair who's friends with the parents in the school to not want to save face, not to see it as my ability to use my power to make a difference, all those things. And we haven't trained our board chairs well enough. No person should become a board chair that hasn't gone through some training. And even if that means you read a book together with somebody right before they become the board chair, even if it means you go to 2 courses together, whatever it is, nobody should just walk into that position because it's a complex, difficult position to be in. By the way, there's another way a board chair sometimes feels, and I see this a lot, which is
Mhm.
they really want to make everyone happy. They want the head of school to be happy. They want all the parents to be happy, and they don't know how to live in the space where someone might be unhappy. And that comes from a lot of partnership between the board chair and the head of school. When I would get a new board chair, we would at that time Peach was in existence, and Peach used to do this new head or new board chair 3-day workshop, and we would go to that with a new board chair, and we would learn how to talk to each other, how to communicate about what we needed and what the best way to work together would be, so that we would set our our whole way of working together right from the onset. Those workshops don't exist in the same way right now, but we should recreate them.
Right.
Maybe you
Do you,
should do those, Barry.
uh, it
I
sounds
don't
like
want to, but
fun.
maybe you should.
Well, the truth is, I was thinking back to a similar conversation. When I was ahead, Page was just about wrapping up, so I never got to go to one of those workshops. But I did have a kind of private coaching with a new board chair, a 3, 4 hour session, really about how you communicate, how you connect, what things you want to make sure to accomplish. And I led a similar session for a new head with their chair. And the head was sure before the session that the chair was just all about himself, his ego. He was, he happened to be a very wealthy individual. And then we got in, and the chair, like after 2 minutes, was saying, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I need help with this. And
Yeah.
I
It's
just don't
way
want
more
to mess it
common than you
up.
think. Yeah, way more common than you think. And I also think that it could go the opposite way, which isn't healthy either, which is that the board chair only gives positive feedback to
Hmm.
the head of school. I will say that I once visited a brand new head of school, and I asked to meet with the board chair, and we met together and separately, meaning the three of us met, and then I met separately with the board chair. And I kept saying, can you like be very honest with him about what's going well, what's not going well, because we want to work on it right now. And the board chair kept saying, things are so good. We're so happy. The head of school was let go before the end of the first year and never got the feedback that he needed. So unless we give the right kind of feedback, unless we can discern
Mhm.
what feedback we do need to give, we're not doing our head any favors, and we're not helping that head grow. That's why the head of school support and evaluation committee is so important, so that there's a mechanism for giving the feedback, and people who really know how to discern what needs to be shared and what doesn't, and in the way that the head can hear it, which is hard. It's hard. And all of that, as you said, working out in advance makes a huge difference.
Yeah, yeah, I had a similar experience right before Pesach. I was on with a head and his new chair, and it was like everything's nice, everything's good. I find that particularly in the Midwest and the South, this is like, we like to be really polite and then stab you in the back. Whereas some of like the New York, or certainly where I'm now in Israel approach, is we're just gonna say it to your face, which is a lot healthier a lot of the time. And this chair was just like, yeah, it's good, it's good, it's wonderful, it's good. And I turned and was like, do you not have anything bad to say? He was like, no, I can't think of anything. So I said, maybe we can set up a code word, because it's hard for you to give negative feedback. So when you need to say something to the head that's going to be negative, you're going to say, I need to have a blank conversation. And giving him that formula seemed to open things up a lot, because he just like he needed a non-awkward way to
A
transition
bridge.
being
He
open.
needed a
Yeah,
bridge. He needed
absolutely.
a bridge. And I think training the conversations that happen before a board chair starts about how to give feedback is critically important. I sat in on a meeting once recently where someone said I gave that same feedback in November and she didn't hear me. And I said, I've been in this meeting and I listened to the way you gave feedback. Did you do it the same way you did it that time? And she said, yes. I said, well, I'm the one who gave the feedback. You were beating around the bush and I pulled it together into the feedback. So if you did it that way, they might not have understood you. They might
Yes.
not have. So I do something like this. So what you're really trying to say is, right, which is, I
Hmm.
learned from being a teacher of 3-year-olds. The first year of teaching, I taught 3-year-olds, and I learned to say what you're really trying to say is this, am I right? And check in make sure that I'm not off, right? But
Hmm.
what I'm basically doing is teaching that person how to say the things that you need to say. And the board chair needs to learn that, and the head needs to learn it because
Yeah.
it's a two-way conversation.
Right. And
That question that John Doria asked, John Doria, who's a consultant in the education field, often asks is, how am I contributing to this problem? And very often when you're getting that kind of Monday morning feedback, or unfortunately for some people, Saturday night feedback, it's very often we're contributing by not stopping it, by not looking for a better way
right.
for that
Because
feedback to get
because
to you.
as a head, we're scared. And we're
Yeah.
saying, let me just duck and cover. And if they say something, I'll do it. And that way I'll keep my job. And many heads perceive the board as this kind of mysterious black box. They don't really understand it, but they know that it can be dangerous. As opposed to what you're describing, which is let's build an authentic, real relationship. Let's learn how to have these conversations and be the kind of head who a board chair feels comfortable having that conversation, be the kind of board chair that a head has the
And it's
comfort.
not magic. It doesn't happen by magic. It happens through conversation, through training, through reading. We sometimes think, well, when they've been a board chair longer, they're going to get better. They're not going to get better unless we work on it together.
Right. Practicing poorly doesn't lead to any sort of improvement. It
Yeah,
just leads to
true.
getting better at doing it wrong. Um,
Yeah,
I definitely hear that. And I think that for many board chairs, that's really a challenge because they're busy. They don't have time in their day, in their night to do it. I've even had many board chairs say, well, I can't talk to the head once a week. I don't have time for that. And my typical request is you need to meet in person, schedule it for every week, half an hour to 45 minutes at whatever time is least likely to get canceled. I find that if they agree to that, they at least end up meeting every other week. But that personal time to sit, possibly without an agenda of complaints, and just say, like, how's it going? I mean, my first board chair was amazing. And one of the most amazing things he did was in our early morning meetings that were like really, really early, because that's what worked for him. He would turn to me at one point and say, just, how are you?
yes.
But in a way that like I knew he meant it, and that made such a huge difference.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference to know someone cares, know someone's invested. I have said, and I really believe this, that the difference between particularly a new head of school making it and not making it is how invested the board chair and the board are in that person's success. Does it mean the person won't make mistakes? No, but it's taken as this is part of the journey, part of the learning journey, and we're here. We're with you. We believe in you, and we care about you, and we want to know how you are. Those people, when you that kind sense of having a board that believes in me and that's invests in me, makes all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. And I think that's an excellent note to end on. Reflecting on my own career, I started with that kind of board chair who both believed that and was very good at conveying it. And I often refer back to that as the reason I was able to get a positive start and manage through the rest. Thank you, Jane. I appreciate your time. I know you probably have about 42 heads left to coach before the day is done. So we will wrap up, but if you want to share any questions with Jane, you're welcome to send them in to me, either on LinkedIn, Barry Kislowitz, at our Substack, Leadership Lenses, or through the form or email on our website, kislowitzconsulting.com. I'll make sure that Jane gets the questions. And if I know Jane, I'm pretty sure that you'll get an answer and some good guidance in response. So thank you again, Jane. It was a pleasure to have you, and happy leading, everyone.
My pleasure. Talk to you soon.